Now we're just moving this aquarium, so we've emptied it and we've put the fish into a foam box. We've moved all the corals and the invertebrates into a foam box. We've got a bigger coral in here, and then we have put the sand in here and we've been washing it with water from the fish tank, and we have the excess water in drums, and then we just take it down to the ute now and move it to the next spot and then put it all back together again. Everyone that moves a fish tank always has to be on the top floor, especially days when you move a tank from the top floor to the top floor. You get one of these curved glass tanks. It's really, really important that when you do set the tank up, it has to be super level, because if there's any irregularities in the base, then this here actually acts like a leverage, and it's actually leveraging the weakest part of the glass. So these all-in-one tanks, the all glass front tanks, are cool, but they're nowhere near as strong, because this has zero give and it's weaker, and this here can become leverage, or even that can become leverage. Whereas if you compare that to this, you've got single pieces of glass, and then you've got a little bit of give here, and basically pressure dispersed within one little piece of glass makes it far stronger than pressure dispersed to a relatively large level of glass, and then you don't really have the leverage because of that tiny bit of give, and it actually makes a massive difference. So you don't have weak points in the glass, you don't have leverage. So you should have all tanks flat and level, but particularly with the curved ones, otherwise you increase the chance of cracking it over time.
Okay. 2.6, that's not too bad.
This is a degree difference.
Yeah, we'll get the heaters on as soon as we can. And we just need to make sure that whenever we move an aquarium, we need to make sure the salinity is on the low side. And then products like Vogel really help with immune system. Low salinity helps with immune system. And keep an eye on white spot anytime you do something like this. Now, one of the things in my life that I don't enjoy too much is filter socks, because they're actually quite a pain in the neck to clean, and they've really got to be cleaned regularly to be effective. So that's something that I don't really enjoy. I really rather try to jig up this area with like a little container and be able to put polyfilter in it. Now, the other thing about polyfilter is that polyfilter will adsorb and absorb anything impure out of the water. So in the situation of aquariums like this one, where there's not a protein skimmer, I would definitely consider a protein skimmer, but then I would definitely consider using polyfilter. And the other thing is that it's a real disadvantage in not having a skimmer, because if you don't have a skimmer, you can't use any organic carbon products for nitrate and phosphate reduction. And if you can't use those products, that means that your nitrate and phosphate is more likely to be an issue. Therefore, you're more likely to have trouble with algae, because basically an aquarium is a competition between the absorption of nutrients through algae or the absorption of nutrients through bacteria. And bacteria is invisible. So if you can have bacteria removing your nutrients, then it's not visible. Out of sight, out of mind. Whereas if your nutrients are available, especially with the presence of light, then you're going to get algae. And then algae is not so fun because you have to clean it. Now, the new water that we have prepared for this aquarium is a little bit colder than the water that the fish are currently in. So what we're doing at the moment is just removing a little bit of water from the tank and putting it in with the fish and waiting 5 minutes. And then we're just removing a little bit of water from the containers and putting that into the tank and waiting 5 minutes and just trying to slow down this process. Then once the tank and the holding water is of a similar temperature, then we'll look at introducing the animals. And whenever you do anything like this, it's really important that you're really watching the immune system of the animals. So making sure you're feeding really good quality food. So things like Danichi and New Life Spectrum. And make sure that you're keeping the salinity on the low side, because higher salinity is going to increase osmotic pressure and put more stress on the animal and make them more likely to fall victim to issues like white spot, something you need to be watching right now. And then products like Vugel is something else that I would definitely be looking at. And Vugel is an artificial immune stimulant, which for situations like this, I find to be very valuable. So monitor, you really want to be monitoring after a situation like this and being prepared, because when you're prepared, you never need it. When you're unprepared, that's when you need it. Whenever you're doing these jobs, it's really important to have reference points for your salinity, because it's really important that any of these fish particularly, you want to put them into lower salinity. So you want to know what your salinity started and where it goes to. And a reef rectometer is an excellent tool for checking your salinity, but it's very important that you calibrate it every single time. Otherwise, you never know which time it's out. And in this particular time, it was out. So my recommendation is every time you use it, get in the habit of calibrating it. It only takes 2 seconds. You just use the test on RO water, make sure that it's set on 0, then you're good to go. Then always make sure you give it a good wipe over with RO water before you store it, so it doesn't get all rusty on you. I'm going to keep a mandarin goby. It's really important that you have cultures of copepods. Now, because we've just done a clean out of this tank, it is more than likely that we've severely impacted the cultures of copepods. So at Majestic Aquariums, we do sell copepods. So I would highly recommend to stock up this tank with copepods and to make sure this guy's got something to eat. Because all in all, this guy's been doing really well. How long have you had him?
I reckon about 9 months, 10 months.
Yeah, and he doesn't look skinny.
No. He was small when I got him.
Yeah, he doesn't look skinny, so you're doing really well with him. But live copepods, putting them in regularly, that's the key. But there's so many other advantages the live copepods do too. I also noticed that your tank didn't really have dinoflagellate algae or dinoflagellates. And a lot of species of copepod actually eat the dinoflagellate. So that's another advantage for having good cultures of copepods. They're just wonderful scavengers and they feed your fish. It's like a win-win. If you're getting green algae, then that tends to be a result of phosphate. But phosphate's a bit of a tricky one because phosphate is available in an aquarium in various forms: inorganic, organic, calcium diphosphate. And a lot of the different types of phosphates actually can't really be tested by a test kit. So that's something that is great for tricking you. So pursuing phosphate control and doing more regular water changes and making sure that you're only feeding high quality foods, particularly something like New Life Spectrum's probiotics. You want to be taking precautions to lower your phosphate if you're seeing green algae, because the test kits aren't going to show up all level of phosphate. Even the rock. So calcium diphosphate actually fuses into the rock. And that's a good and a bad thing. Because what happens is when your aquarium's relatively new, it acts like a buffer. So what happens is the phosphates slowly build into the rock, which gives yourself a little bit of a buffer. But then once it's full of phosphates, then it slowly leaches out of the rock again. So that's a good and a bad thing. So you just need to be very patient with any of your phosphate control, because it doesn't necessarily work straight away. And there are some products now that make sure that you don't have zero phosphate. I'm not thinking of any off the top of my head, but there are products that make sure that your phosphate level is not zero, because you're not actually aiming for zero. But at the same time, if you are getting green algae, it's probably not zero anyway. The other thing about green algae is it can suck up all your phosphates, but then as it starves and as it dies, it releases the phosphate back into the water to feed the other algae. So fixing phosphate is a very slow process, but you just got to stick with it, because you will fix it. and then it's also a slow process for it to go bad. So fixing phosphate is a slow ship to steer. So it tends to go bad slowly and it tends to fix slowly. But it is what it is. We've started putting everything back into the reef again. So you can see what I'm trying to do here is get as much off the substrate as possible. I'm trying to minimize contact with the substrate. And then I'm trying to create some nice shelves where the corals can go on. And I'm trying to separate all the corals so they don't sting each other. But you have to be constantly watching them, because when you're doing a job like this, you're not really sure where or what anything is. So as everything starts to open up, you need to sort of be on guard to start moving things to make sure they're in the best position, and most of all, make sure that nothing's stinging each other. Anyway, so far so good. The other thing is that be really conscious of the color of your rock. So what we're wanting is this good coralline. So there's some very good coralline here, and that's really what we're wanting to proliferate. So having nice high calcium, carbonate, magnesium, and pH is what we really need to grow that coralline. And then trying to limit our nitrate and phosphate, but make sure it's not zero. And also the introduction of copepods is something we've discussed a bit today, because this tank has actually never had an outbreak of dino, which is that terrible brown algae that you grow. It's not really an algae, but your dino. And because this tank's got a mandarin in it, it's always been getting regular introductions of live copepods, and your copepods are a really great way of controlling dino as well. So it's a real win-win, because the copepods help to eat your dino, and the copepods breed, and the copepods help to scavenge in the aquarium, and the copepods provide a food source for your fish like mandarins. So it really is a desirable situation. Just that copepods are rarely available in a lot of areas. So where you can get them, you want to really get them. Never ever want is this flat surface. Because if you've got a flat surface, you're not going to get proper gas exchange. So you will need to be positioning your pumps and so forth to make sure that you're getting agitation. It needs to be getting broken. Obviously not necessarily as severely as that, but we really want it. Got some beautiful agitation now. So the fish are acclimatized back into the aquarium again. All the corals are back in. So we've got to keep a real eye on these corals as they open up. Give the tank a day or so without the light on to let everyone settle in. Let the corals slowly open up again. We've got the heater back on, so that's going to slowly raise the temperature, which is almost 22 degrees now. We really want that back to more like 24 for us to be happy. Everyone's doing what we expect. So now regular water tests and regular monitoring is really what the tank wants now. So a good day without light. And we have not put the extra rock in. Just because you got it doesn't mean you want to use it. Don't want to forget this fella. There you go, buddy. Go back to you, mate.